Hey folks, it's Katie Phang from the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network. Harvard is coming out swinging, slamming the Trump administration for its, quote, campaign of retribution, filing a lawsuit this morning, a 72-page, 10-count complaint in federal court in the state of Massachusetts, going after Donald Trump, the Trump administration, Kristi Noem, and others for their illegal and their retaliatory conduct just because Harvard University will not bend the knee. In Harvard's lawsuit, it sought a temporary restraining order, meaning it asked a federal court to block the Trump administration from being able to ban Harvard's ability to be able to have foreign students at its school. The federal judge telling Harvard, I agree with you, and so I'm giving you the relief that you are seeking. But let's get into the details of this lawsuit because they're really good. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on May 22nd, just yesterday, sent this absurd letter to Harvard University stating, quote, I am writing to inform you that effective immediately, Harvard University's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification is revoked. Now, let me be clear. Harvard was given no notice that this was going to happen. According to Kristi Noem's letter, Harvard has created a, quote, unsafe campus environment that is hostile to Jewish students, promotes pro-Hamas sympathies, and employs racist, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And because of that, Harvard has lost its privilege to enroll foreign students. Now, the practical impact of this letter yesterday on May 22nd is that any students that were there, foreign students that were there at Harvard under certain immigration status, that their status was revoked immediately. So they are required to have to transfer to another university or just go home to their home countries. Noem goes on to say, consequences must follow to send a clear signal to Harvard and all universities that want to enjoy the privilege of enrolling foreign students, that the Trump administration will enforce the law and root out the evils of anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism in society and campuses. You know, I don't even know if Kristi Noem, somebody should let her know that her petty is showing that maybe she's just bitter because she's not smart enough to get into a school like Harvard. So after Harvard gets this letter yesterday, you got to give Harvard some credit. Within 24 hours, it sues. And so let's talk about that lawsuit, and we're going to show you some portions of it. So as I said, it's a federal lawsuit that's been filed in the United States District Court in the District of Massachusetts. It's a 72-page complaint with 10 counts. I'm going to have us go to the very last page of this lawsuit because I want you to see who the brave lawyers are that are putting their names on this lawsuit against the Trump administration. Jenner and Block, that name sounds familiar? Well, it should, because that's a law firm that's been facing its own executive order, one of those bitchy executive orders from Donald Trump. Well, they're facing their own executive order, and they have filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump, and they have been beating him in court. William Burke from the law firm of Quinn Emanuel. If that law firm sounds familiar, it's because they have already sued Harvard just a few weeks ago when Trump initially was putting all this pressure on Harvard, that Harvard had to cow to the demands of the Trump administration to run the university the way that Trump wanted to run the university. And because Trump had been attacking the university in its attempts to gain control. Also, Quinn Emanuel, that law firm, they are also representing Kilmar Abrego Garcia, along with other amazing lawyers, but they're doing that on a pro bono basis. So you got to say thank you to Quinn Emanuel. And then interestingly, you also see Robert Hur from the law firm of King and Spalding. Robert Hur, special counsel appointed to investigate former President Joe Biden in the allegations of mishandling of classified documents. So, I mean, look, maybe this is a redemption tour. I don't know. But look, all kidding aside, in a day, in a time, in a climate, and an environment when it is hard to be a lawyer against the Trump administration, you got to give them credit. So let's talk about some of the allegations in this lawsuit. Harvard, just calling it what it is, a, quote, blatant violation of the Administrative Procedures Act, the First Amendment and the Due Process Clause. Harvard making it clear that this is retaliation. Why? Because Harvard refuses to do what Donald Trump wants it to do. Donald Trump wants to control Harvard's, quote, governance, curriculum, and the ideology of its faculty and students. Like I said, it's a 10-count complaint, violations of the Administrative Procedure Act, as we mentioned. The First Amendment, you cannot abridge the freedom of speech under the First Amendment. And listen, it's not just for people. It also pertains to universities. Even private universities have the right to be able to exercise their freedom of speech pursuant to the First Amendment. There's also this idea that there's a violation of something called viewpoint discrimination. The First Amendment allows you to have your specific viewpoint on an issue. The First Amendment prohibits the regulation or the censure of speech based on the specific motivating ideology or the opinion or perspective of the speaker. Also, you're not allowed as the government to impose limits on the use of government funds if you're doing it to leverage someone else's speech, or you're doing it to infringe upon somebody else's right to exercise their First Amendment right to free speech. You also have an allegation of this, and this we've seen through the Doge litigation as well. If you are going to be terminating funding or terminating an administrative process, there's a procedure to it. You cannot summarily come in and just say, to hell with it. I am just going to end this because I feel like it. And this lawsuit makes it very clear that if DHS wants to withdraw the certification to be able to have foreign students to be enrolled at Harvard University, they have to provide notice as to why they are withdrawing the certification. And after this notice is received, the school has 30 days to submit an answer to admit or deny the allegations. Sounds very much like a regular lawsuit. When you sue someone, they have a certain amount of time to be able to respond to the allegations. And Harvard actually has the chance under the law to submit, quote, sworn statements and documentary or other evidence to rebut the grounds that have been provided by the federal government to withdraw this status for foreign students. The school must also be given the opportunity to request a telephonic interview in support of its response, and it must be permitted to be represented by counsel of its choice. Let's just take a second here. The failure of the Trump administration to give Harvard the right to be a part of this process not only violates due process, right? But it violates the Administrative Procedures Act, among other things. But this is so typical. We are seeing the Trump administration being called out for this bad behavior in the immigration space, right? We're seeing federal judges that are saying, what the hell? You're supposed to be given notice, an opportunity to contest or challenge the designation that's been given to you as a terrorist, for example, or to challenge your deportation. And this is why it's such a big tell for this administration. If the administration had the evidence, if the administration had the actual meat on the bones to be able to substantiate its claims and its allegations against Kilmar Abrego Garcia, for example, or against Harvard, for example, if they had it, they would show it. I talked about this yesterday in my video segment about Doge. Why is Doge running to the Supreme Court to get its permission to help hide and to be secret from the American public? If they're doing such a great job, they should want to show their work. Same thing here. If there is something that is going on, then Harvard should have the opportunity and the notice to be able to fight back with evidence. But no. The Trump administration knows that they're wrong, and so they're just quickly trying to shut everything down for Harvard so that Harvard doesn't have a chance to defend itself. And I'm just going to quickly just go over a few more things. Again, the Department of Homeland Security violated certain sections, federal laws, because it failed to institute, quote, agency proceedings for the revocation of the certification for these foreign students at Harvard. Instead, it summarily revoked Harvard's certification by issuing a revocation notice, which, by the way, is this random letter. 2 pages. It's like, hey, Harvard, we're going to get rid of all of your foreign students that have the certain immigration status designation because you know what? We don't like the fact that you're not kissing Trump's ass. You want to know how many people are implicated by this? Because I think you need to know this, right? There are about 6,800 international students, or about 27% of Harvard's student body that is going to be impacted by the revocation of this status. The president of Harvard, Dr. Alan Garber, this morning in a letter to the Harvard community said, "We condemn this unlawful and unwarranted action. It imperils the futures of thousands of students and scholars across Harvard and serves as a warning to countless others at colleges and universities throughout the country who have come to America to pursue their education and fulfill their dreams." So, very quickly too, I want to talk about the following. I want you to understand that there are currently at least 8 investigations spanning 6 agencies against Harvard, simply because Harvard will not bend the knee and kiss Trump's ass. So we have significantly the funding cuts and freezes, and I want you guys to understand why this is really important. When you talk about a pressure campaign, this is exactly what the Trump administration is doing. They've cut $2.2 billion in multi-year research grants, $60 million in contracts, mainly from the National Institutes of Health, the nation's primary agency for biomedical and public health research. They've terminated $1 billion in National Institutes of Health funding. They've paused $1 billion, which is tantamount to termination, $1 billion in National Institutes of Health funding for Harvard's research partners, including Brigham and Women's Hospital, an internationally recognized teaching hospital in Boston for its work on heart and vascular cancer. Harvard's been disqualified from all future federal grants, termination of $450 million in multi-agency grants. Why? Because the school is a, quote, breeding ground for virtue signaling and discrimination. $60 million in grants from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have been terminated. And then there's countless investigations, at least 8. And Trump has also threatened to not put any money, federal funding. We've already seen it happen on May 16th. Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, because, she has such an astounding amount of experience in education coming from wrestling. She said on May 16th that canceling the remainder of federal funding remained an option to, quote, apply pressure on Harvard. And then also Trump has threatened to take away Harvard's tax exemption status, which is also insane because, under the law, the president cannot instruct the IRS to do an investigation into a person or an entity. People, listen. I'm impressed with the turnaround time for Harvard, less than 24 hours after getting their foreign students revocation letter and notice. They did this. My father came to the United States at the age of 19 with $2.43 in his pocket. He barely spoke English, and he came for an education of the American dream. My father studied at the amazing Gonzaga University in the state of Washington, Spokane, Washington, too. So shout out to my folks in the state of Washington. My father came here as a foreign student. My father came here because he knew that part of the American dream for him involved getting an education. We are going to be facing an exceptional brain drain already due to the horrific policies that have been instituted by Trump and the Republicans that are under the guise of being anti-DEI. But we're also now going to be punishing these foreign students, almost 7,000 of them at Harvard University, for absolutely no reason other than a, quote, campaign of retribution. Trump has called Ivy League universities, when he was campaigning for president, he called them Marxist maniacs. Well, here's a news flash. I went to one of those Ivy League universities. I went to Yale. As an undergraduate, I'm a proud alum of Yale University. I am not a Marxist maniac, but you know what I am a maniac about? Justice and the right thing being done. So you know what? This lawsuit against Donald Trump and the Trump administration and that dumb Kristi Noem, it's a big middle finger and it's a bring it on. So support Harvard. Publicly let them know how much you are rooting for them, because Harvard is creating an ability for other universities to stand up as well. So we gotta recognize the wins where we get them. I always tell you that. And I will close with the following. I watched the last episode, before the very last episode, of one of my favorite shows, The Handmaid's Tale. And within that episode I just watched, we saw June Osborne, the titular character, head character of this show. And before they tried to hang her, she screamed, "Don't let the bastards grind you down." Don't let the bastards grind you down, people. Harvard's not going to let the bastards grind them down. You should not either. Be mad, be outraged, demand accountability. I'll see you on the other side. Katie Phang here. The truth matters now more than ever. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.